Welcome to Life Recovery Today with Stephen Arterburn. In the next half hour, you'll obtain insights and tools to transform your life using the biblical principles found in the 12-step program. We believe everyone can benefit from a life recovery experience because we all have struggles in life. Struggles with addictions, food, depression, anxiety, and relationships, to name a few. You'll be encouraged to see how others have found a new way of life with hope for the future through life recovery. Your host is Steve Arterburn, founder of New Life Ministries and Women of Faith, author of over 100 books, and teaching pastor at Northview Church in Carmel, Indiana, one of the 20 largest churches in America. Steve is the co-editor of the Life Recovery Bible, the #1 selling recovery Bible. With over 3 million copies sold, this is the Bible given to inmates by Prison Fellowship and the Pew Bible for the Salvation Army. Now here's Steve.
Hi there, Steve Arterburn here, and welcome to Life Recovery Today. I want to start out by telling you about two products. One is a brand new book just out, I wrote it with Marcus Brotherton, called Every Believer's Thought Life. And if you want to enrich your recovery life, this book will help you. The other one is this big old giant Life Recovery Bible. And this Bible would have never happened if I hadn't had an amazing friendship and partnership with Dr. Dave Stoop. Dave, I miss him greatly. And before Dave died, he came into Northview Church, who has such great teaching and preaching. And he gave a message. I suggested that he do it. He gave a message about his own story. And this sermon, in the midst of all these great speakers, was the most downloaded, re-listened to message at Northview Church that year. It was so impactful. And so I wanted you to hear it straight from Dave's mouth. Dave probably had no idea how many people he impacted over his lifetime. I'll guarantee you he had no idea how many people he impacted just from this one talk, and they still are talking about it. I wanted to share it with you, so here is my good friend, Dr. Dave Stoop.
We're talking this morning about the opioid epidemic, and to give you a sense of what kind of epidemic it is, I have a few statistics relating to the problem. The most incredible one to me is that last year, over 60,000 people died of an overdose, of drug overdose, most of them on opioids. Now put that in context, there were that's the wrong word to use, there was over 50,000 men and women who died in the Vietnam War, which spanned a number of years. And we thought that was appalling, but the truth is that it's been surpassed now in 1 year by the opioid issue. There's a personal side to it. I have my sister's grandson, Mikey, lives in just south of Cleveland, lived just south of Cleveland, and last year he died of an overdose, and he died with the needle still in his arm. That's how quickly he died. And many are dying that way because the drug dealers are cutting heroin now, not with sugar or lactate, they're cutting it with fentanyl. And fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin, and it's 100 times more potent than morphine. So it's both a legal and an illegal drug. It's used legally in hospitals. It's seldom, if ever, prescribed for home use. And it's used with people who are dying in pain and great pain. But it's now being manufactured illegally in China. It's being shipped to Mexico, and Mexico, of course, brings it in with the other drugs that they bring in. But 60,000 deaths means that over 100 people are dying each day. So while this day passes, there will be 100 people in our country who die from an overdose. Today, just in one day, there will be 580 new heroin users. 580 people will start using heroin today, every day. 3,900 people will initiate non-medical use of opioids. The Indy Star, which I guess is your newspaper, said that in Indiana alone, 288,000 people have used opioids for non-medical use. That's 1 in 20 have used opioids for non-medical use. So look around. Just think every 20 people, one of them is using opioids for non-medical purposes. In 2016, here in your county, in Hamilton County, there were at least 36 deaths from overdose, mostly in the 25 to 34 year age range. And I would be willing to guarantee that when they get the statistics for 2017, it will at least be double that, if not more, because that's the rate at which it's growing. Now, what are opioids? It's probably the most addictive medicine that you can get, and it includes morphine, codeine, and heroin as the natural substances, but most of them are synthetic substances. There's oxycodone, Percocet, OxyContin, Vicodin, methadone, tramadol, and fentanyl. These are all opioids. There are other drugs that are addictive. Steve and I were in Florida a couple years ago speaking at a treatment center, and we were talking with the medical director, and he said that it had been 5 years ago, 70% of his residents, inpatient residents, would have been alcoholic, dealing with alcoholism. He said today 70% of his residents were dealing with prescription drug addiction. And since then, that was a couple years ago, since then that's probably increased. He was listing the addictive drugs such as Xanax, Valium, Ativan, and Klonopin, and he also included Adderall and Ritalin, which was a surprise to me. I hadn't encountered that prior to that, but not soon after that time we talked together, I had a young man come in who was referred by a treatment center. He was in treatment for addiction to Adderall. He had crushed the Adderall pills and snorted them through his nose. So it's a large problem. Now, you can ask, well, who's at fault? Well, Big Pharma is one of the things at fault. There's a company called Purdue Pharmaceuticals. It has nothing to do with Purdue University. Steve wanted me to make sure I mentioned that. That was exposed last summer in a long series in the LA Times. They've made, two psychiatrists own it, and they've made billions of dollars off the sale of OxyContin and Percocet. And the sales have dropped off because they're putting more and more restrictions on the use of the opioids. And so now they're turning to Europe and to Asia to try to do the same thing that they did here, which means they were training doctors in the use of the medication. And even they had influence with the Food and Drug Administration to get their drug certified for use twice a day, every 12 hours, which antagonized the whole problem because its effectiveness only lasted for 4 hours. Now, well-meaning doctors are prescribing it. My wife had a knee replacement last fall, and I've had one of those, and it's a very painful operation. My knee looked like a football, an old weathered football for a while. It was ugly. Now I got a nice scar. But she finished. When the surgery was finished, she was sent home 2 days later with a prescription for Percocet, and the doctor gave her a prescription for 100 Percocet. Now she took it every 4 hours because they've changed the usage on it now for about 5 days, and then she forgot to take it at night. And she hadn't bothered to take it in the morning. And the physical therapist was at the house, and she was starting to describe some of the internal shaking that she was feeling. And the therapist said, "You're going through withdrawal." She was taking Percocet for 5 days, and she stopped for 2 doses, and she started into a withdrawal. That's how addictive the opioids are. She said, "You need to get a less potent drug." So she called the doctor, and he gave her a prescription for 60 tramadol, which is a milder form of Percocet, and she refused to take it. So I've got a lot of Percocet and tramadol that's cheap if you need some. If you watch Blue Bloods, which is my favorite program on TV, there was a program early in December where 2 young high school students died of an overdose, and they finally trace it back to who was providing it, and it was a physical therapist who was getting all kinds of opioids from some of his physical therapy patients who didn't need them anymore, and selling them on the street. So that's a common thing. Anna Lemke, who is a medical doctor who heads up the addiction program at Stanford University Medical School, wrote a book called Drug Dealer MD, stating that a lot of the drug dealers today unknowingly are medical personnel. And there's a quote from the book: "What began as a good faith effort to improve the lives of patients in pain soon gave way to an epidemic of opioid painkiller overprescribing. The pharmaceutical industry, specifically the makers of OxyContin, that's Purdue Pharmaceuticals, played a pivotal role in the epidemic. The LA Times last summer exposed them and how they trained doctors. They changed the number of people in chronic pain from 25 million, which was the estimate that was common at the time, and said, no, there's 100 million people that are in chronic pain. That's almost a third of the population. And they need to be prescribed painkillers. And so they would get academic doctors to do research to validate this, and then they would go and train your doctor and my doctor in how to prescribe it, and they made a conscious effort to do it. They played a pivotal role in the epidemic. The pharmaceutical industry was able to influence doctor prescribing only by joining together with academic physicians, professional medical societies, regulating agencies like the medical boards that licensed MDs, and the Food and Drug Administration. Together, these different factions manipulated and misrepresented, deliberately or otherwise, medical science to serve their own agencies. It's interesting, on the Today Show, the current head of the Food and Drug Administration admitted fault this past week, that they were partially at fault for the epidemic that's going on today.
Are you going through your struggles alone? Do you want someone to talk to help you through your pain? Do you feel like a failure when you relapse again, telling yourself, next time will be different? Don't walk this path alone anymore. Join a life recovery group today and be a person that your friends and family can be proud of. God created us to be in community, and we believe everyone can benefit from a life recovery experience. There are life recovery groups all over the country, and if there isn't one in your area, we can help you start one. Life Recovery brings recovery to you, right where you are. You'll take a journey with others to find healing and freedom. Whether you're looking to join a group or start one, New Life Ministries is here for you. Call us at 1-800-NEW-LIFE or visit liferecoverytoday.net.
Well, you know, as Dave says, addiction has hurt so many people, and in his story, the hurt that Dave felt was right down here. And fortunately, you know, he was able to make changes in his own life that impacted the life of his son. And I love the fact that up until the death of Dave Stoop, he was a learner, he was an explorer. I respected him so much. So let's go back and hear some more wisdom from Dr. Dave Stoop.
Now, there's a personal side to this story, as Steve said in the introduction. We have a son who is a recovering heroin addict. He started when he was 13. He didn't use heroin then. He just started into drugs when he was 13. And this was back in the 80s. And I knew nothing about addictions. When I went through my doctoral program to become a psychologist, there were no courses available. There was no courses even thought necessary for addictive issues like alcoholism or drug addiction, or video game addiction now, which is an interesting phenomenon. Our son started to withdraw from the family. He started to skip school. I would drive him to school because where we lived there was a lot of turmoil because of imposed busing and changing schools and that. And he would go in the front door and out the back door and hang around with his other friends who were using drugs. One of those friends introduced him to heroin on his 18th birthday. For 10 years he struggled with heroin addiction, and we had no understanding of what was going. I took him to a counselor who also didn't know anything about addictions. And so he was counseling him on things that were totally irrelevant, just like I probably would have. And it was just Not, no training. Now I got my training separately, and then the boards kind of corrected it and required that there be a course on addictions and alcoholism in the training programs for psychology. And they also started offering continuing ed courses that we were required to take to renew our license. But when it started out, we had no clue what was going on, and so we just kept quiet, took them to counseling, hoping that would make a difference, and nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. We were forced to talk about it. I was embarrassed, being a shrink, you think everything's got to be in order in your own house, and it's not true, but that's what people think, and I was told that a couple of my friends. But I was teaching a large Sunday school class at the time, and like some other people I know, I prepared at the last minute. That was just my nature. It was always fresher if I did it Saturday night. And Saturday afternoon, our oldest son lent our middle son his car. Our middle son was the one we were having trouble with. And our son never came home, and the car never came home. So we spent all evening and well into the morning hours looking for him in all the places we thought he could be and looking for the car, all to no avail. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, we gave up, and I realized I got to teach this Sunday school class at 9:30, and I am not prepared. And I was too tired to do anything about it. So I went to the class, and I was prepared to embarrass myself and be honest and admit to what was going on, and I did. And I shared some of what I was going to teach on, and then I told the story of what happened the night before and what we'd been through for the last couple of years with one of our kids. When the class was over, I thought, well, they'll get a new teacher next week. But they didn't. More people came up to me and shared their stories. Some that weren't very encouraging was the one, I remember one shared the story of their brother who was a wayward son, and the parents prayed for him, and the parents died, and it wasn't until after the parents died that the wayward son got himself right and straightened out his life. And I thought, I got to die before my son gets things right. But then others were sharing their stories, successes and failures, and understanding and supporting us. And for the first time, we felt that there was encouragement in that other people knew and stood by us. So it was a coming out that was incredible. Now, there were 2 times in the course of his heroin addiction that I set it up for God to work a miracle. I had it all set up. It was a perfect setup. I don't have time to explain to you how I did it, but trust me, it was guaranteed to work. And I think God didn't pay any attention because he was probably working with your kid, and he just ignored my kid. And nothing happened. And the second time, nothing happened. And then I realized I'm not God. God is God. Who am I to be telling him what to do? And I quit. And I took to heart what I read in Isaiah 30, verse 18, where it says, "Yet the Lord longs to be gracious to you. Therefore he will rise up to show you compassion. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all who wait for him." And I figured I better wait until God decides it's time. And I did. And some people get angry at God at that point in time because God just doesn't do what they say. But I was careful because I knew God was God and he did it his way, not my way. And so I waited. We waited. Finally, Steve Arterburn suggested a program to us that was family-oriented. And we started, he had started 13 treatment programs during his journey of false recovery and not getting anything different. But he started 13. One of them, a lot of them didn't know what they were doing. One of them, he was forced to wear a toilet seat around his neck as an initiation into the program. Well, he didn't initiate into the program. He left, and he left a lot of them. He finished 1 or 2. But then Steve told us about this program that was family-oriented, and we signed up for it. And what we had to do, we had to go to a group therapy setting where we were in a group with other addicts and other family members. Nobody from our family was in it. Our sons were supposed to go to a different group, and one of them was to go with his wife to a different group. So there were 6 of us that were all going to group every week, once a week. And my encounter was not easy. I'm used to running groups. I don't like being in a group as a participant. I want to run it. And I had no way to run it. I was a participant. And so I come into this ongoing group where people knew each other, and we introduce ourselves. And I say, I am Dave, and I'm here because my son has a problem. Well, there was a young 20-year-old man sitting across from me who just about came off his seat. He said laughingly to me, that's what my father said when he first came to this group program. You're going to find you're here because you have a problem. And they sat back down, and I sat there and said nothing. But he was right. I found out, I got to know him. He was a neat young man who was an alcoholic starting recovery. He was able to pass the Highway Patrol sobriety test, and even when his dad gave it to him, he could pass it. And he passed it the last time with what they found to be a 0.28 blood alcohol level. Now, that may not mean a lot to you, but I think the definition of intoxication for driving while drunk is 0.08. So that's 3.5 times the amount of alcohol in his blood system as somebody who is considered legally drunk. If most of us had a 0.28 blood alcohol level, we would either be in the hospital dying or we would be in a coma. He could pass the drug, the sobriety test without a problem with that kind of alcohol in his system. Now, what happened was we started to recover. Well, we didn't finish the program. It was a year-long program. And we had to do family therapy. I said that. Our son had to be in individual therapy. Then we had to go to Al-Anon once a week. And then we had to also go to what's called a speaker meeting every Monday night, and for 6 months. And one of the counselors was always there taking attendance, because if you missed, you were kicked out. Well, somehow my wife slipped and said that we hadn't been to Al-Anon, and she got in trouble. I kept my mouth shut. And the counselor said, well, you need to go to 30 meetings in 30 days. My wife thought a moment and said, I can't do that. I don't have any time to do that. And the counselor said, well, then you got to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And she repeated, I can't do that. And then the counselor said, well, you need to leave then. So we were kicked out. I got up and left with her. I wasn't going to embarrass her and not leave. But we learned enough that we were different. One of the things that we did during that time was we pressed charges against our son, put him in jail. Now, there were times when I would pay the bail, I'd pay the lawyer, because I wanted to keep him out of the system. And it was foolish. It was a waste of money. And finally, we learned that no, you let them face the consequences of their behavior. That's what tough love is all about. And so one morning we got up and our stereo equipment was missing. We called the police, and our son was missing, of course, too, because when he was using, we didn't know where he lived or what he did. He lived on the streets. And the officer starts taking a report, and he's writing in his book, and he stopped and he said, could one of your kids have done this? We said, yeah. He put his pen back in his pocket and closed his book, and he said, but we're in a program that requires us to press charges if that's the case. And we have to do it because we can't not do it. So he got his pen out and finished the report, and sure enough, our son had taken the stuff and taken it to a pawn shop and hawked it. And so he ended up in jail for 6 months because I pressed charges. I couldn't have done that. The hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I couldn't have done it without the support of that group. Fortunately, we hadn't been kicked out yet. Now, he started to clean up his act, because he was learning from the program as well. And he got pretty strong, and he was working, and he bought a truck with his own money. And he stopped by our house on a Friday to leave us the money he had borrowed that week for his lunch, $10, I think. And then he was going to go to pick up his girlfriend and take her to dinner. Well, he never got to his girlfriend's house. She called and said, "Where is he?" We said, "We don't know." So he never came home. He never contacted us. He just disappeared. A couple of days later, I found his truck at a used car lot. He had apparently sold it back to the people he bought it from. And he found out later he'd met a former friend who was addicted as well. They went on a run and disappeared, and we had no idea where he was. About 6 months later, we don't know if he's dead or alive, because there were many cases of that kind of a situation. His girlfriend calls and says, "Have you heard from your son?" And we said, "No." She said, "Well, if you do, tell him to call me, because my brother just died of an overdose, and he was the only friend that he had, and he'll want to know what happened." Within 30 minutes, our son calls out of the blue. And we said, "You need to call your girlfriend and then call us back." He was in Colorado, and he had gone on a run and had stayed on that run for 6-7 months. And we sent him a bus ticket, no money, just a bus ticket, to come home. He was a pallbearer. And then he got in touch with the guy who was heading up the Teen Challenge program, and he went into Teen Challenge. Now, the word on the street back in those days was, if you're serious about getting out, you go to Teen Challenge. And it started him on the path of recovery. He's been clean and sober now for 29 years. We got our son back. And I give all the glory to God, because I had nothing to do with it. I stood back and allowed God to work in His own way and His own timing, and that's because a lot of people were praying.
Welcome back. Well, this is a two-part program, and on our next program, we're going to hear Dave continue with more insights that could help anybody, especially you, on a recovery journey. Now, if you or your family need help, please call us, 1-800-NEW-LIFE, and I'm always grateful that you would watch this program, but especially this one. And I hope and pray you'll come back and watch the next one, because Dave Stoop had such an impact on so many people. Again, this Bible, we're at 4 million of these Bibles. And every single month, more and more people are finding out about the Life Recovery Bible. You can call us and ask to speak to Terry Ward if you want to start a Life Recovery group based on this wonderful Bible that Dave and I put together with a lot of help from recovering Bible scholars. Also, don't forget, you can call us and get a copy of Every Believer's Thought Life to get rid of some of those old patterns that really mess us up. God bless you. Thank you for joining me for Life Recovery Today. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us for Life Recovery Today with Stephen Arterburn. We hope this program has helped you integrate God's truth and wisdom into your recovery journey. This program is brought to you by New Life Ministries, and it's your support that keeps this program on the air. When you contact us for any reason, be sure to let us know that you watch on NRB. Call us at 1-800-NEW-LIFE or go to liferecoverytoday.net. Please join us again next week for more Life Recovery Today.